to protect, because energy is the start of everything else in a recovery.
Thanks, Jorge. Good points. I would like Sergio go to the financial view of the Argentine energy.
Thank you, Raul. Yep. So as a credit analyst, I kind of keep my scope within my wheelhouse, if you will. Personally, I don't think the energy sector will have a material role in economic recovery in Argentina in the short to medium term. In fact, I think our energy companies, and by energy companies, I mean oil and gas. I think power is a different animal. Will suffer more as Argentina is facing potential default and is looking to restructure its international debt. So what we're seeing is Argentine energy companies scaling back production, scaling back investments in CapEx to really preserve liquidity as they manage this difficult domestic and international market, volatile market. Now, that's not to be said that given the whole scale of Vaca Muerta, that it won't have a material impact or can have a material impact on the economy. It just hasn't. I mean, in 2020, we're expecting that total sales for oil and gas sales will represent roughly about 3% of GDP. It was about 4.5 times in 2019. These are not insignificant numbers, but they're not very material. And also, as far as revenues, taxes paid by energy companies to the federal government represent less than 0.5% of actual revenues. But one thing I think the government can do and is implement different policies. One is to one thing the government can realize is having some form of export tax. If an export tax is kind of an opportunity for the government to generate revenues, but unfortunately companies, as I mentioned before, are not producing, are not exporting, and part of the reason is also these capital control measures that are existent at the moment. The whole purpose of exporting crude out of Argentina was to generate US dollar revenues, keep cash abroad, and offset the FX risk that is inherent in the market. And capital controls that are in place kind of discourage that kind of investment. And as far as government's involvement, I mean, I think the sector would be better served to be more independent. Unfortunately, we have recent history of government trying to implement policies to help incentivize investments that worked in the short term, but essentially the government couldn't afford them. So what the government can offer is some type of policy support, which we saw today with the Bertero, to help kind of guarantee a floor to help companies still generate a stable cash flow. But it's not necessarily enough. I mean, Argentine companies, unfortunately, due to their operating environment, face two financial risks that other companies necessarily don't have to. One is they have a high cost of capital, and they have FX risk. And this is just inherent of the operating environment. And if the government somehow can help address those two financial costs and risk for the companies, that might also help encourage investment for exportation.
Thanks a lot, Saverio. I think I have a mistake with your name before. I call you Sergio. Thanks, Saverio. And I would like now Thomaz Favaro, who is expert in risk analysis, and Argentina is a risk, usually. I would like your comment, please.
Thank you very much, Raul. I think if we take a historical perspective, I think it's very clear that Argentina is going through a period of deindustrialization that actually started a while ago and probably in the 1980s, but has continued almost uninterruptedly until today. So as a result, Argentina is today much more dependent on commodities than it has ever been in recent history. And within the commodity space, we have obviously agriculture, you have mining, and you have the energy sector. I think the last one remains a critical source of revenue and investments in the country. If you look in 2018, according to Santander, 1/3 of the FDI that inflows to Argentina were concentrated in the energy sector, and that's largely because of the shale resources it has. class in scale and cost. But what we have seen, and this is part of the puzzle that we try to help our clients with, is around how to manage the political risk landscape. And to be honest, that has been very, very challenging for energy firms, particularly those who have a long-term play at stake. Because if you look at the investors that have been in Argentina, they don't have had the luxury, what we call is policy predictability, the idea that you can anticipate to some degree or some extent the next steps that the government will undertake. It's been also driven partially by ideological issues, but not exclusively. Economic issues, I think, have also been sort of a predominant driver of these political risks. If you look at the prior administration, for example, the Macro administration, it has implemented some measures that I think try to improve the business environment, but in many others, it were forced to backtrack on them because of economic circumstances. If you look, for example, in October 2018, the government allowed companies to finally resume exports to Chile, and a few months later, in February, it was already freezing those exports again because of a higher than expected peak in domestic consumption. You had the same sort of a telenovela with the export taxes and so many other measures that make the operating environment quite challenging, as Saverio alluded to. But I think the flip side is that the shale play does allow companies to adapt the situation, adapt to a more volatile situation than, let's say, conventional resources. If we were talking about massive investments up front that would be paid in a long period of time, I think that would be much more challenging for energy companies to accept investing in Argentina. But because of the life cycle of the non-conventional wells is much shorter, this allows the companies to eventually, over the course of concession, scale up and down according to the circumstances. And now, just alluding to the specific government policy that was recently announced, it's obvious that the government will have to play a balancing act in terms of maintaining the barril criollo. At 45, it's something that it's it would be difficult to pursue, particularly if you have to remember that this is coming alongside, a freeze in fuel prices, meaning that the increase in prices is probably not going to be passed on to consumers. So it's a difficult equation to balance. I think we ultimately interpret this as a short-term relief measure that is much welcome for the energy companies that are operating already in Argentina, and need to, again, manage those flows of investments and understand how much they cut production and on ratio. I think the signals around export taxes, as I've already alluded to, are also quite important in that sense, in terms of helping the companies to make that calculus. But it's difficult to see that on its own really bringing the inflow on new investments or fresh investments that would require to, I think, make Vaca Muerta or to really exploit the Vaca Muerta in full.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you, everybody. It's an excellent discussion. You mentioned something that I would like to go deeper now. The following question that I have for all of you is the following. Will there be a renewed effort to boost oil and gas development, such as the barril criollo, or measures to stimulate Vaca Muerta, or will renewable energy and energy transition be a more central focus of the recovery? Please, José Luis.
Yeah, I think yes. I think the government has implemented the barril criollo. That's signal one route. When you look at the decree also opened the door for discussion on costs on the supply chain. So that is a positive. I believe in the same line of thinking. I hope when the COVID crisis is past and when the debt challenge is solved, one way or the other, the government will push legislation to try to offer some certainty on I repeat the idea of the Nielsen-Fernandez law, the Fernandez-Nielsen law. But on top of that, the government cannot create demand. There's no way the government cannot create demand. Cannot create demand locally. I cannot create demand internationally. So the restriction the government has, that you cannot create an artificial demand for hydrocarbons or for natural gas. So it is what it is. It would not be, if at some moment it was the idea, okay, vaca muerta is the new soybean, is not the case anymore. The government will be proactive. It's a government that has a proactive view of the economy, will be very involved, brokering agreements with suppliers, union, provinces, and companies, and will do a big effort on creating comfort for the companies. I know there are big efforts and very productive negotiation with Equinor, with Chevron, with Wintershall, with the big international companies that have invested, so they stay. But the global crisis on oil prices and gas is not something that is in the realm of the Fernandez government. So they can do a lot of things just to attenuate the depth of the crisis, but they will not solve it. They don't have a magic gun to solve it. They have some tools in other sectors. For example, I think they have relaunched the construction of the Nestor Kirchner hydro plant in Santa Cruz. That is a $5 billion investment. The government has confirmed with the German government their willingness for the construction of Chihuido. That is 1.5 or 1.6 billion project. We are part of the project, and that is co-financing between Germany and Argentina, and is well advanced. The government has confirmed they will build the Portezuelo hydro plant in Mendoza. It's another billion plus. So when you put those three projects, is 5 or 6 plus 1.6, 7.6 plus 1.2 or 1.3. It's like 8 billion in hydro projects for the next 3-4 years. So that has an impact on size and employment. And then, so in renewables, I don't see this government pushing too much in solar and wind, unless there is a new round of subsidies on the supply side. So they are very efficient. So maybe you have a second round. If not, I believe that today installed capacity for generation covering excess the demand, especially in a low growth scenario. Even in a negative growth scenario, there is excess capacity. So I see hydro growing a lot. I think the government may move in nuclear. They have an agreement with China for a nuclear plant with some technological exchange, and though there are conversations going on that, so maybe they move in nuclear, and that is another 5.7b. But it will be a very active role for the government in terms of government investment. And all the things I mentioned is a lot of public funding, local and international.
Thanks very much for your thought, Jose Luis. You mentioned several projects that really are also international questions, like the relation with China, German. So these are very, very important, and the public funds is a problem also. Please, Jorge, your thought about it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I do agree with Jose Luis that it's impossible to create demand at the government level. This is one of the factors that we cannot control. On the other hand, from the industry point of view, we have to understand that the industry is facing a lot of competition today, not only locally, but also internationally. They need to increase the technology that we have available and we can deploy into all the different basins and type of production in Argentina is very, very high, because through technology, the companies get more competitive, they can reduce costs as well. The investment temperature is not very good for Argentina, so it will be increasingly difficult to get funds. So more and more companies will have to rely on what they can produce. And on top of that, there was already before this pandemic and this supply-demand crisis, there was an increased pressure on the side of the changes on environment and social factors. So it's a cocktail that the industry has to navigate today. And so, as I said before, a short-term solution would be incentives like the criollo barrel, but it has to be short-term. Not hasn't. This is not a solution for the long term. It can be a shortcut. There are other measures that the government at the federal level and the provincial level can do in order to help develop the industry and continue having a national supply and not rely on importation that is an outflow of very hard-earned dollars in Argentina. Your question was also on the renewables, and I believe that renewables have a big role in this situation and in the future in Argentina for multiple reasons. One of them is that from the electrical interconnection point of view, there is a big advantage on having more distributed generation in Argentina. It's a very economical, very efficient way of getting power to all the communities. And obviously, we have the resources available in Argentina to do that. The level of investment in these renewables are significantly lower than in oil and gas. So it's one of the things that, even though through the pandemic and this difficult situation, it's one of the things that have continued overall in all the countries throughout Latin America. So I see that that will increase, and also oil and gas companies are thinking themselves in converting part of their energy needs at the production level into renewables. So I think that the mix is there. We have the technology, we have available the companies in Argentina to do that, and we have to make a good use of it.
Thanks, Jorge. Good points. Please, Saverio, your opinion.
The oil and gas side, I think the government is in crisis mode, is trying difficult and uncertain time. As you know, I agree with Jose Luis and Jorge. The government can't create demand, but one thing the government can do, and I mentioned this last year at the conference, is there is the capacity to transport gas from Argentina to Chile to meet 100% of Chile's gas demands on a daily basis. But that's more of a political issue rather than an operational logistical issue. But that could be one potential upside for more investment in gas in Argentina. But frankly, I just see the government, as it's navigating its own financial crisis, trying to help or assure that the companies in Argentina are viable. More importantly, I think for them, priority is YPF, which is why I think this $45 price for Maria Criollo is kind of what it is. It's, I think, from my modeling, it's a price that is meant to guarantee a certain amount of cash flow for YPF to keep their liquidity so they can face some difficult debt refinancing. I mean, on the renewable side, I think people are well aware of the capacity that Argentina has in the south, particularly with wind, and the potential it can really exploit, natural resources it can exploit to kind of make the system more efficient and maybe cost effective. But unfortunately, when the government tried to do rent-a-bar programs, only about 25% of the PPAs awarded are actually going to see operations. And other contracts or PPAs that are awarded over the last 5 years are in risk of being renegotiated and are amended. So I think, again, it's kind of, to reiterate what Thomaz said, is it's really difficult to predict the regulatory environment in Argentina and whether things will change. And I think, unfortunately, what has been realized in the last 5 years deter investment in the electricity sector. But again, Argentina still has a good amount of its installed capacity being inefficient, meaning it's single cycle, and there is potential for upside. I just don't see financing coming in, or at least reasonable financing coming in, and there's other regulatory concerns that would inhibit investment.
Thanks, Saverio. It's important this question of exportation to Chile, because I think Argentina has to understand that the conventional and non-conventional production are a different thing. And we don't have, we have the reserve there. So we don't have to care about the reserve, and we can continue exportation. And this even is good for the Argentina. So we have to think different in this question to exportation to Chile. Please, Thomaz, Favaro, your thought.
Yes, I think I very much agree with the others in the sense that the government is significantly more concerned about the future of oil and gas than it is about any other aspects of the broader energy sector, including renewables. If you look in terms of job creation or even tax revenue, the oil and gas is a much larger sector, and it has much more profound impact on Argentina's society. In fact, if you look at the 8 or 9 provinces that produce hydrocarbons in Argentina, most of them are very reliant, if not full-blown dependent on oil and gas, for tax revenues, for job creation, for basically for the life of provinces across the board. So this is a political priority number one, and this will to continue going forward. And I think you also mentioned the potential exports to Chile, and I think Argentina also has the potential to increase its, let's say, pool of clients through LNG exports, right? If you look at the geographical advantage that Argentina has, for example, to service demand in Asia during peak demand there, and summer months in Buenos Aires, I think there's a lot of potential around there, but there are many challenges I think to overcome in order to make that. I think that dream come true in many ways. We're already seeing, a few initial shipments of LNG, but if you were to, I think, to highlight the key challenges, first is that exports remain concentrated under a narrow window because within the calendar year, because Argentina still demands more energy than is currently producing. Particularly during winter months. You also need companies to increase capacity increase size to bring in the economies of scale to compete in what is an incredibly competitive market. You have to remember that LNG prices were already tanking even prior to COVID-19 because of the surge in production globally. So now that demand is plummeting, this will be even more of a challenge. I think we also have the financial component, which is a perennial concern in Argentina, but will be more so now with the COVID-19 crisis, obviously impacting credit and availability for new investments. So I think this also remains a viable long-term play, but because of all the political and regulatory uncertainty, breath over its short-term outlook, certainly not over the next 2 years.
Thanks, Thomaz. Very good comment. I would like to mention to the audience that we have a polling that you can vote and see what happened. I have a very good, excellent question for the audience, and I would like to answer one of my friend Chris Spalding, about with all the natural gas at Argentina. This is for Jose Luis, I think. With all of the natural gas that Argentina has to develop that could be used to power generation, why would the country go to nuclear if they have natural gas so much? That's basically.
Well, it's a public policy question, and there is an answer. The answer is that you have to have a matrix. You cannot depend on one resource, and you have to have a diversified matrix. And the same way that Argentina has the gas there, Argentina has the know-how for nuclear, has a very, very, very competitive scientific cluster, and it has financing available. So when you put the mix, it's not that difficult to do it, even if it is expensive. And it keeps an edge on technology that then trickle down around. It's the same thing that with satellite. There are 2 or 3 things where Argentina surprised. It's like the Argentinian contradiction. One is the nuclear capacity. Second is the biotech capacity. And third is the satellite aerospace capacity. So Argentina export nuclear reactor has all the technology from Pacific to non-Pacific use. Obviously, Argentina has resigned the capacity for non-Pacific use because it's signed every Pacific use treatment and is engaged in Pacific use treatment all over the world, but has the technology, and it cannot give up on this because it's one of the things where Argentina create high quality, high value added. And in fact, we have exported to Australia, we have exported to Libya, and we compete one-on-one with the leaders. So if Argentina has access to financing to do something in nuclear, it will do it. There's no doubt it will do it. The second thing is with the gas. What can you do with the gas? To export Chile, we have to do something which is very political, which is recover your client. Argentina interrupted the contract with Chile. Chile looked to the Pacific and decided that geography was not an advantage, that you have to look for reliability in your supplier. So they moved into importing and they moved into LNG. So they say we pay more expensive, but it is reliable. And they pass the cost of that into their price structure. So for you to recover that is price, but it's also reliability, and that requires a lot of political engagement. The government has appointed a top ambassador. He's a former Minister of Foreign Relations, Rafael Bielsa. So I think that is a sign they want to put the relationship at a very high level. So maybe you recover Chile as a client. And then when you recover the client, you cannot interrupt the contract anymore because we interrupt the contract, the supply to Chile, to Uruguay, and to Brazil. So it's very easy to say we sell to the neighbors, but then if you are the neighbors, it's not that easy to totally rely on sustainable exports from Argentina. So you have to recreate trust and confidence on that if you want to secure your regional market. The one where I see a window that has not been totally explored is in fertilizers. We have a big deposit of potassium at the south of Mendoza that Vale, first Rio Tinto, after Rio Tinto, Vale tried to develop, and at the end they dropped it, I believe, because of the potassium prices in the world, but also because of the dynamic on Lava Jato, because it was led by Petrobras and all that story. But the potassium is there, it's already proven, was in construction, and this is 150 kilometers from Vaca Muerta, and it's very close to the gas window of Vaca Muerta. So maybe there is not that demand for gas molecules, but it's the demand there for fertilizers. And you have the gas and you have the potassium. So maybe fertilizers are an exit for the gas and a lot more of petrochemicals. So I believe, yes, there's a lot of value in the gas, also transforming on the transformation of the transport fleet, especially the public transport fleet, to natural gas. Argentina has of the highest penetration, and you can do a lot more on that, on having gas in taxis, individual vehicles, and buses. And in parallel with some EVs, the government will push for EVs, will push for buses, electric buses, but obviously there is a role there for gas, which is very efficient and much cleaner than liquid fuels. So yes, I believe the gas industry will survive. It may require $3 of floor. So maybe at $2, the wells cannot be drilled in 2021. Or the supply chain for drilling goes down, so you can drill for $182, or you will have to wait 2 years or you need a sustained price of 350. My friends in the industry will say 350, maybe it's 3, but it's not 180.
Very good point, Jose Luis. I have to confess that I particularly like the question of the capacity of our technician, because I am vice dean of College of Engineering in Universidad de Buenos Aires, and I know the large capacity of our students and professors.
Let me add one thing.
Very glad to
hear in international finance and institutional discipline, as good as our nuclear scientists or biotech scientists or satellite scientists, we will do better.
That's right. Very good, Jose Luis. I have another question here for Santiago Espaltro about the frozen of the tariff will be continuous, much more than 1 or 2 years. Well, maybe Jorge could answer and remind us how bad has bad for the economy have been to frozen the tariff so many times, so many years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the quicker we return to a more market signal economy, it will be better overall for the whole country. Look at, I have a very recent example throughout the crisis in Colombia, in Bogota. The people living in Bogota have seen increase in electricity tariffs during the crisis, and we are talking in certain cases up to 20%. So is the other side of the coin where a country that has a stick even stubbornly to the market economy is taking different measures. So I think that again we can take short-time measures, but in the long term there are other things that are more efficient or better for the overall economy rather than tariffs or freezing of tariffs. We are talking about natural gas, and natural gas is very important for Argentina. It's over 50% of the energy matrix, which is remarkable. Not many countries around the world can say that. But at the same time, our need for gas has been increasing over time. Argentina produced last year 130 million cubic meters per day of natural gas. That is 4.5 BCF or 4.7 BCF in American standards. And we have an increasing need of more pipelines, for instance. So along all the capital investments that the company or the country is planning in the future, beefing up, increasing the capacity in our pipelines is critical. For instance, there is a very important pipeline from Tratagen near Vaca Muerta to Saliclo in Buenos Aires that we need that if we are going to have an increasing production in Vaca Muerta and we want to export gas through LNG, for instance. But along with that, there are multiple other even short haul pipeline increases that the country needs. And it's just an example of other things that the country can do in order to prioritize over just freezing of tariffs. So hopefully the freezing tariffs is short term, but if there are no other solutions or measures in place, it may take a long time. I mean, 2 years is not unusual for Argentina, unfortunately, in the recent past.
Thanks, Jorge. I have a specific question for Saverio. What is taking sufficient measure to address the global oil production overhang and demand downtown? What should the company focus on for the remainder of 2020 in the long term? Please, Saverio.
Because it hasn't had the chance. I mean, right now, priority number one for YPF is debt refinancing and maintaining a stable liquidity profile. The company from today until the first quarter of 2021 has $2.3 billion of debt coming due, with the largest ticket being a $1 billion international note that is maturing in March of 2021. International capital markets are essentially closed for Argentine issuers, and there's a lot of uncertainty of how YPF is going to be able to refinance this bond. But again, some of the measures that were announced today help to make the company more or less free cash flow neutral, but it really needs to borrow in order to be more, in order to sustain its business profile. I think also the other thing that is hurting the company is the company has a full cycle cost of about $41 a barrel or barrel equivalent. $5 a barrel alone is attributed to interest expense. This is the second highest in the region after Pemex, which is about $8. So the company needs to really find a way to lower its cost of capital, make itself more competitive, not only domestically, but also internationally. But again, this is all subject to what is going on, the bigger picture in Argentina and economically. But no, I think the priority for YPF is purely maintaining its debt maturity profile, trying to manage its interest expense with hopes that things improve domestically.
To allow some comments from Jeremy. So I would like to say thanks a lot to Jose Luis Manzano, Jorge Milanese, Sergio Saverio, Minervini, and Thomaz Favaro for this fantastic panel, for the comments. I'd like to announce also that in half an hour, YPF President Guillermo Nielsen and the Subsecretary of Hydrocarbons, Juan Jose Carbajales, will give us the national